Hi, Phil. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So so in any case, I'm glad that you're doing all these interviews with everybody
Oh,
because it's it's great that you've taken the time to document document as much of return as you could or as you can as it were.
yeah. There's not many people left, as we both know, from the production, and those that are seem to have disappeared. So,
Yeah, yeah. Either they've disappeared or the thing that I've discovered, of course, is that watching the interviews that you've been doing with everybody, uh, the difference between the what's fascinating for me is that the difference between being a fan of the show and being there and how I absorbed every minute of what was going on. Like, oh my God, this is the best moment of my life. To listening to other guys, listening to Michael and Ray and Herman, where really to them it was just another job. You know, it was just we just put our hours in, we do our best, blah blah blah. And the difference between their recollections and my recollections are to me are fascinating because I mean I'm just like
hmm.
there'll be questions that you'll ask that I won't know the answers to, that I just won't remember. But I feel like I remember everything as if it was yesterday.
Hmm.
And it's because, I had to, for me, I had to pinch myself every day and go, I'm actually working with Robert Vaughn and David McCallum as they are playing solo Anelia. This is amazing. So for me, it was a
Yeah.
whole different
Hmm.
experience.
Oh, yeah. I think it's like you say to them, it's just another job, and there were a few weeks and they were booked for something else. It was in and out. I didn't really probably give it much thought beyond that, really. And of course,
Yeah.
as fans, we have a different experience with it, of course. So yes, it's quite
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
interesting, really.
You know,
Um,
because but I don't know how much of that fan type stuff you want in the interview.
I suppose much information as you want. Of course, the experience of being there it is I think quite an important one for us to go through, and you know we can be as geeky as we want to be, can't we? We can go in as much
Yeah, I
detail.
don't, and I don't have any
Everyone's probably
problem
going to
going.
think of the same things.
Okay, because I don't have any problem going geeky on this stuff because it's like when around that same time, I had just, you know, um, I was geeky. It's like Uncle was always my passion and still is my main hobby. And I was a big, I am a big James Bond fan, and I was a big Bond fan at the time. And when the Diamonds Are Forever shot, generally local to me, in Vegas and Oceanside and Palm Springs and stuff. As a fan, I was on the set almost every day for that as well, watching Sean Connery, do James Bond. So I was like,
Oh wow.
same kind of thing where, I on that I had, that I was just a fan and I snuck on the set as often as I could, and occasionally I'd get kicked off, and then I'd come back and you know turn up in places that they were like, how the heck did you got it's like it was like one thing to, didn't we run into you in Palm Springs? And then it's like, but how the heck did you get out here onto our oil rig a mile offshore? What the You are really dedicated. So so I have Diamonds Are Forever stories as well. I mean, my spy
Yeah.
geeky stories are they're
Hmm. Oh, I think that's certainly worth exploring at some point. So,
yeah.
right, have you got the two movie so you can watch it as we
I
go along,
do.
sort of thing? Do you
I
have
have it in the background here. It's just a matter
perfect,
of
lovely.
whenever I've got it at the starting point, And I guess it's just a matter of us doing a countdown and jumping into it.
Absolutely, yes. So I'll do a countdown shortly. So for anybody
Okay.
watching along with us, if you want to watch film as we're talking, just pause on the opening shot with the world map, and we'll do a countdown from 5 to 0, and then we'll press play and we'll sort of go through it together. If you don't have the film to hand, don't worry, it'll be more sort of general conversation, I expect. So if you just want to get your copies ready, and we'll start in a few seconds' time. Okay. Right.
Cheers.
Okay. So everything else ready? Um, okay, so let's ask myself, wouldn't it? Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. So Robert, of course, we're seeing
Okay.
a modification of the original titles here. I guess
Yeah.
this was quite a lot of work to get this right.
Yeah. No, the title house did this. I forgot Fitzsimmons, I think, was in charge over at the title house that we were using. The main thing about the titles here is that I had carte blanche. Well, our production had carte blanche to use things from MGM during the production. And what I did is I went to MGM and I got the original backgrounds, that orange and blue background that was used on the original show, on the original titles. Um, I got that, I borrowed that from MGM, and that's what I gave to the title house to make those to make that credit sequence. So that's the original background from the original series that we used on that. And I came up with the logo that was the updated logo. Though I tried to convince Michael to just stick with the old logo to maintain, because I think that the old logo, the original logo, is like a classic. It would be really hard to best that. So, but in any case, Michael asked me to do a new logo for the show. So I tried to incorporate as many elements as I could. Right now, what you're watching is not, a lot of this is going to go by really quick. This is the spec. This is the Spectre ring of Thrush. There's an overlay of James Bond into this story that I wish wasn't here. There's a lot of James Bondian-ish about the story. Now, the Thrush agent seating at the very far end there is myself. I play a reoccurring Thrush agent throughout the whole film. So that was one of my fun things that while I was on set, they had a reoccurring Thrush role for me. So I was a bad guy in the show. Now, in the script, this all takes place in the Arctic, and the plane is brought down, which is why everybody's wearing Arctic clothes in the middle of the desert here. Is that originally this was supposed to be in the Arctic in a big snowstorm, and this giant at kind of walker emerges from the snow with a big thrush insignia on the side of it and picks up the downed jet and puts it in its belly and walks away with it. That's what was in the script originally. And there just wasn't any budget for it. This is a real prison. I drew the Thrush logo for Anthony as kind of an in joke because he says, the only thrush I've ever seen or heard is this one, but it just happens to look like the original thrush insignia, which ironically enough, the new U.N.C.L.E agents don't recognize. He Since Anthony doesn't draw, I drew the sketched thrush logo. Now I worked on the show as the quote unquote technical advisor. And what the heck does that mean? Well, it wasn't for Cameron, it wasn't for the guns, and it wasn't for store. It was an odd. it was an odd situation in that I was actually the technical advisor for anything Uncle. So everybody would come to me in regards to getting the old show right. In this scene, Anthony Zerbe came over to me and asked, "How do you pronounce Kuryakin? Is it Karyakin, Kuryakin, Karyakin?" And I was like, "Kuryakin." And he's like, "Oh, okay, thanks, Bob." Um, Anthony was great to work with. This is pre-Bond, him as a villain. These guys are actual, the workers are actual prisoners. And I don't know how they were chosen to be in the shots. We were told on that day not to wear blue jeans because all the prisoners wear the blue shirts and the blue jeans, and so the crew, not to be mistaken for a prisoner, were requested not to wear blue jeans. Now, the Thrush helicopter here, the original helicopter that showed up on the day was from Circus Circus, and it was pink with balloons painted on the side. So the day's shoot got halted a little bit at the very beginning of the morning because Thrush couldn't have a helicopter that was pink with balloons on the side. So they had to do an emergency refind of a another helicopter. This is Gary Jensen doing these stunt. I think it's Gary Jensen doing these stunts. Our stunt coordinator. They actually, and then they had actually Anthony actually held on to the helicopter for these shots. I'm sure the insurance people went out of their minds. Those are actual prisoners, like kind of living out their fantasy of a helicopter coming by and picking them up. God, this is just going so quick. Of course, Patrick McNee. Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of like said, well, maybe he's in a disguise. Maybe he's assumed a different name, but it was hard not to think of him as John Steed having
Well,
taken
well,
over, having
Ray
taken over
Austin,
Uncle.
well, Ray Austin, of course, brought Patrick Ian because of their relationship on the Avengers. So that's how Patrick
Yeah.
ended up in the film, of course.
Yeah. And he was a friend of Michael's as well. And all the casting in the show, most of the casting in the show is because of, being friends of Michael. These two guys come in and say, "Hi, we're section 2." That's stuff that I actually was able to get Michael to put in the script. That was part of my job is, how much Uncle can we get in here? So I made sure that, if agents were in an enforcement, they were in section 2, and Michael put that in the script. If they referred to research, that was section 4. So that was part of my job. This is a map that I made. I was also making, not only was I consulting during the production, but in pre-production, I actually took on the assignment of, and in post-production, took on the assignment of helping the art department put together stuff. So that's actually a little insert that I did that was needed. We put together a little insert team to do inserts like that. Now, here, somewhere in, I always get a chuckle out of this. Somewhere in Libya, the research every script goes through, or I should, most scripts goes through a research period where they double check and check for copyright problems or informational problems. One of the big note that we got back on this was there is there are no dams in Libya. Would you like to rewrite this sequence? So Michael basically said, I don't care whether there's dams in Libya or not in real life. We're going to shoot it, Hoover Dam, and so therefore Libya has has dams. So we just kept that, and as our art director Herman Zimmerman said, not many people get to see the inside of Hoover Dam. And I don't know what strings or what was pulled as far as being able to use the dam, but all the tunnel stuff, these dynamos are all the real deal. This is a portion of the film that I tried my best to I kind of argued with Michael about the fact that the structure of Thrush as seen in the show here is just like Spectre. A criminal organization coming back with the head of the organization, a la, Sefrin here as Blofeld and his comrades all coming back together as if it was disband. Of course, I had long conversations with Michael about the fact that Thrush was actually in the show a supranation, was actually a supranation. It was actually a more like a country that people belonged to and had their and that they were loyal to, and was headed up by a council, the Supreme Council, with the aid of the ultimate computer, and it just did not function or look like Spectre in any way, shape, or form. But Michael felt more comfortable about sticking with the Bondian kind of Spectre idea of thrush. So for me, the thrush that exists in this film doesn't seem to coincide with the thrush as we knew in the original series, but that's something that we had long discussions about. But Michael felt more comfortable about making the show more of an echo of James Bond, a lot more at times than the Uncle format. Um, but that's just one of those things that as the advisor, that was my job to advise, and then for Michael and Ray to make the decisions. Now, I designed the uh, I designed the badges for the show, and I gave them like 5 or 6 different versions: yellow, silver, some with computer chips in them and stuff. But they loved the black with the yellow logo, and unfortunately, having chosen the black, it doesn't show up very well on people's black suits, especially Solo and Elia's stuff. So that was a downside. I wish we had kept. I was hoping they would choose kind of a the silverish burnished metal badge that I had put together, but they went with the black. This is at Caesar's Palace. Again, working with Robert and David was, yeah, for me, a dream come true. Um, I, um, I don't know. Yeah, I think the guy on the left hand side, those are my hands. The guy in the dark suit, I'm standing in the background, but because my head wasn't going to be in the shot, I got to play a bystander as opposed to my thrush agent. Um,
Hmm.
um, uh, Robert and David were contacted by Michael early on. They had some meetings at a coffee shop in New York, or I should say tea room. I think they actually met at the Russian tea room. I'm not 100% sure. But with Michael's track record, he was able to get Robert and David on board. One of the things that was interesting is that both Robert and David had their hair dyed for the show, so that it matched up more with what we remember from the original series. This was one of the first days of shooting, and um, I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of what I could fill in here. It was a back room. It was just a like yeah, a back room toward the very back of Caesar's Palace. Phil, you got any question about this?
Well, of course, if Vegas, we mentioned Diamonds of Forever earlier. Vegas back in '71 is very different to modern day Vegas, but also in 1983 it wasn't quite as developed. Can you sort of perhaps talk about how Vegas was sort of back in the
Oh,
time that
it
you
was
made
just a
this?
lot flatter. I mean, there weren't any
Mm.
of the big high rises.
Mm.
But yeah, moving on, you can see how David's hair was almost a dark brown at this point, and they lightened
Mm.
him up so that he would be much more Elia. In the script, she makes a comment here. Brooke, I think it's Brooke. I may get some of the names
Ah,
wrong.
yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry about
Yeah.
that. It's been a while. But she makes a comment, any shorter and it would be a belt. In the script, it was a mini skirt that she was wearing, and he was like hemming it. And so she's like, her comment about any shorter and it would be a belt is about
Mm.
the fact that she's wearing this really skimpy mini skirt, and that's our costumer there in the back. I've
Ah, yeah.
gotten her name, but we, as the crew got little cameos throughout the show, and that's our actual costumer. Uh,
That's
in there.
Barbara Siebert.
Yes, Barbara. And that's shot, and the Vanya stuff is shot on in a little store, not a storefront, but a little business office, um, either on Beverly Boulevard or Melrose, down by either Fairfax or Highland. I'd have to go look at my notes. There was a store next, there was a store called Chickadee about 5 stores down from us that was a nostalgia shop. And I remember during one of the breaks, David and a couple of other people and myself went down to Chickadee's because there was a, like a nostalgia store with memorabilia, and David spotted a action figure of himself, a Gilbert action figure, and it was pretty expensive, but David bought the action figure saying that he was going to take it back to Catherine. And so yeah, so David took some time off, went next door, and an action figure of himself and brought it back to the set.
Mm.
Um,
And of course, when they did the some of the publicity, I think maybe before the film started, they had the toy guns, not from the actual production or
yeah,
anything. So
right. Yeah,
the toys were there.
Lee, the announcement, the production announcement, which was done back east. I believe Lee Pfeiffer, the editor of Cinema Retro, provided the guns for that.
Mm.
Now, ironically enough, I'll talk about this later on. Ironically enough, the Uncle guns don't appear in the script, and that was actually an addition that I made to uh, to the project. And
Mm.
I can talk about that later, later on.
Yeah.
So the Vanya's was there. Again, this is the back room.
Mhm.
They brought in the oh um, freeze frame. Of course, we've got the flashing as it says in the script, the flashing uncle lights, which Fred Cohenkamp went down with his guys and just spun. He went down to the casino and stood between a bunch of slot machines and just handheld spun the camera around to create the spinning lights. Fred Cohenkamp, who is the original cinematographer oh on on Uncle, was on board. Now, since we're dealing with the Uncle communicators here, I had in my collection one of the original communicators, and I offered to have some of my effects team create replicas of the communicators for the show. So they were dead on replicas to the original show. When I first handed the communicator to Robert, because I didn't think I had to say anything or explain anything to him, I handed him the communicator for the scene, and he just looked at me blankly, like, what am I supposed to do with this? And
Mm.
because I thought, I thought that, he'd recognize the communicator and know exactly what to do with it. But he just gave me this blank stare of, yeah, well, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry. So I had to flip open the communicator and take down the antenna. And he went, oh, it's one of those. Oh, I got it. I got it. I'm like, okay, sorry for making the assumption. But what tickled me as a uncle fan was the fact that when Robert opened the communicator on his own for this take for the takes, he actually flipped it open and then twisted the antenna like he used to do on the old show to like get a channel. And I was just like,
Mm.
wow, it's just like this trace memory that, he once he knew what it was and that it was that communicator, it's like he naturally, flipped it open, twisted the end. And I was like, cool. Solo's back. So yeah, so the communicators that we used on the show are exact replicas of the ones used in the series. I think we made about 10 of them, and several of them went out to fans after the show. And I still have I still have the one that Robert used. Um, and so we tried to keep it as accurate to the show where we could. We did the accurate stuff. Now, of course, he says some kind of code. The swallows will return to Capistrano or whatever. Now, I'm watching this without any sound so as not to get distracted. So I'm going from memory here, bits and pieces. But obviously they never used any kind of codes like that on the original series. And I did get it. People rag on Tom and the Kowalski character for being so aggravating, and oh God, he just drives us nuts as the new Uncle Agent. Well, that was Michael and Ray's very purpose for putting Kowalski and the other Uncle Agents in there, was to make a really distinct. Oh yeah, there I am on the right hand side, with the woman. Um, the but yeah, Kowalski and those guys were supposed to be irritating, so they achieved their goal. This was fun seeing, Robert doing his first action sequence for the sequence. And and to this day, I don't know why. This is this is early 80s. So he had these funky K car things from Chrysler or whatever. And they're just, they're just horrible, you know. And then of course, because it was such a low budget, you couldn't have any, really expensive cars. So whatever the bad guys' cars were, they had to be just these horrible junkers that because they were going to get destroyed. That you just couldn't afford. You just couldn't afford anything else. And of course, this is all Gary. If my memory serves me correctly, Gary Jensen was our stunt coordinator, and he would go off and shoot these sequences on his own while the rest of the production was shooting with the other actors. So we had two units going, second unit and first unit. Being a big On Her Majesty's Secret Service fan and being a big fan of George Lazenby, I got a kick out of being able to work with George, who's obviously going to be
Mm.
coming up in a moment. And her references to Bullet were fun. And then of course, when she says like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, was a great nod to OHMSS. Um, uh, this
Did,
whole
did
thing
George seem
about
to?
this whole thing about Solo being in computers and Elia being a dress designer in the script, as everybody I think knows at this point, in the script, Solo was the dress designer and Elia was the computer had the computer company, and it was David McCallum who flipped them around, who suggested to Michael that he flip the professions around to make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more, a little more surprising to the fans. And and David used to do this on the original series as well, put as much input as he could. And there's a memo from Sam Rolfe saying, producers, since I'm leaving, at the beginning of second season, keep an eye out for David because he likes to add things a lot, and you got to keep him on track. So there was even like a memo from Sam Rolfe saying, David likes to add things, so be very wary about this. So now we get to the Aston Martin, which in the original script, James Bond shows up with a red Mustang borrowed from Tiffany Case. The fact that I had a silver DB5 Aston Martin at the time as one of my cars, I loaned it to the production. It was an automatic, so George was kind of like, why is this an automatic? And that's my personal PPK that I loaned to the production. I also I designed and created the armrest for the missile activation and stuff. So that's where the Aston Martin was not in the script, and during pre-production, I brought my Aston Martin over and showed it to Michael and said, would you consider using this? And he was like, what? Where in the hell did you get this? I'm like, well, it's just my own personal car. And you can tell by this is the console that I designed and made. Then the prop department, did the rockets and did the oil slick and stuff. Now, the oil slick and the rocket shots, those inserts were done later on in LA. After principal production was done, and we were in LA. We started in Vegas and eventually ended up back in LA. Love the aside to the camera, just like on Her Majesty's Secret Service with "This never happened to the other fella." The I wrote, the insert, like I say, the inserts of the oil slick, the inserts of the rockets were done in LA. This is a street in LA downtown. Um, let's see what else. It's funny. You can see the the cassette player in the background there, beyond the armrest. Um, and then this guy who says, "Hey, you want to buy a car or whatever?" is Mike Sloan himself doing a little bit of ADR. So that's
Right.
Michael's voice.
Hmm.
Like
Did you get
like
the sense
like
that George?
and George had a great time.
Sorry, go
George was a friend of Michael's, and which is
on.
why he got written into the show. And George was enough of a friend of Michael's that Michael created an entire television series for George called The Equalizer for him to play a retired secret agent. The network, unfortunately, was not happy with the idea of doing having George Lazenby, and the network decided to do it with Woodward. But the original concept of Equalizer was actually done for George Lazenby, and that's the thing
Okay,
about
interesting. Yeah.
Mike. Yeah, the thing about Michael is he's very loyal to his friends, and this is a penthouse up in Caesar, and the photo on the wall, that was something that Robert Vaughn himself brought in because that's one of his few mementos from the original show. And Robert himself brought that in to put on the wall as kind of a nod to the old series. And then that's one of the from a fan standpoint, it's one of the it seems, I'll just put it this way. That photo seems to be a big fan favorite. It's one of my favorite, even though third season of the original show was not all that good. They did some great publicity shots, and that shot of them in the hallway with the red smoke seems to be well, it's certainly one of my favorites and seems to be a big fan favorite. And Solo, charming as ever. Um, you know, and what was interesting
Did
is
you?
that the schedule
Uh,
on the show was really tight. So, Vaughn and McCallum, as people say, when they go into a scene, they just hit it out of the ballpark. There's no retakes. They're almost always one take guys. They just come in, they hit their marks, they deliver perfect lines, and then they just move on. Now this is that was a moment of like the really charming Napoleon, and I wish that he'd been able to maintain that a little bit more throughout the whole about the whole show. There were times where it felt like he was playing Napoleon a little too grim. I needed a much more lightness to his touch. But that moment where he turns to Andrea and gives her that smile is just pure, pure Napoleon Solo. And that shot of David and Robert kind of passing each other almost, that was shot downtown. Then we have Anthony Zerbe. As we pull back, we see the Old Thrush logo on his desk. And that was one of those things that the art department put together the new Thrush logo, the lightning bolt, but they allowed me to throw the old logo in right on Zerbe's desk because it was kind of like old school. He was holding on to a little bit of the old school. I'll go back to the insert shot there of Del Flores, but some people question why is the entrance to Del Flores on the wrong side? Well, it's because it's a real location and we couldn't change it. Um, at the time that we shot this, I talked to Ray and I talked to everybody and I said, "Listen, the changing booths are on the wrong side. The fans are going to catch this. What we could do is we can shoot it normally, but part Robert's hair will switch his watch to his other wrist, and for the day shoot, we'll part his hair on the other side. We'll shoot it as we go along. You can shoot it as we go along, and then we'll flip the image and reverse it so that the changing booth is on the correct side." And they turned to me and went, "Are you nuts? Nobody's going to know whether or not the changing booths are on the right side. We're not going to change Robert's hair, and we're not going to we're not going to flip the image." I said, "That's what I'm just here to advise." But I'm telling you, people are going to ask, why is the changing booth on the wrong side? But there is we can correct it. And they were like, "No, forget it, Bob. you're you're getting too geeky. You are totally geeked out on this." And I thought, okay, well, that's what I'm here for, is to be the geek. So that is why the changing booths are on the wrong side. Now he's told to go to the novelty. Oh, United Command for Law. I had to have them put the "and" in there because they did not put the "and" on United Network Command for Law and Enforcement. So at the last minute, I was like, "Guys, this is a common mistake. So if you guys can come up with a couple of more letters, that would be great." So we stuck the "and" in. So that was my job. Was, oh my God, still tailoring. Also, I had the idea of giving him the visitor's badge so he could switch out, because they originally had him just walking in without a badge, and then her giving him the badge. And I was like, we need a visitor's badge because he can't get past the opening. Now, the editor cut out some uncle-ish kind of things that the editor felt that they were going too long. Originally, he comes through a sliding door, comes up to the desk, and the receptionist hands him the badge, and then he continues on. And because they thought it was just shoe leather, just taking time, they cut that out. But there is a establishing shot that we did of Solo walking through sliding door corridor, and then the receptionist handing the badge, which is a guy, which is why Elia later on, when they arrive, they also go through this corridor with the sliding doors and then come up to the receptionist, and it's a guy, and the guy touches the badges because they needed the chemicals on the badges to activate them. He hands them to them, and then they walk away, and Elia says, "What happened to all the beautiful women in Uncle?" And the reason why is that it's this old 60-year-old guy sitting at the reception desk handing out the badges. Um, I had to earlier we saw a shot of Del Floria's, and I had to go through a bunch of video, some beta. This is how early this was. Beta video. Oh, okay. Remind me about the scarf if I forget. Pennington's scarf. Yeah,
Mhm.
the I had to go through beta stuff, beta tapes, and I finally found a clean shot of Del Floria's from third season that they used for stock footage on fourth season, and had MGM run that off for us. So that was stock footage directly from MGM. Originally, when Napoleon, we didn't shoot this, fortunately, because we ran out of time. He's supposed to go to the novelty shop to go to the new headquarters. Then he goes to in the script, he goes to a novelty shop, a toy shop, and wanders around until a little spouting whale in a fish tank finally swims up to him and spouts some water and says, "Go to the back room." And Napoleon's like, "What did you say?" He says, "Go to the back room." And he goes, "Okay, that's a whale, something like that's a whale of a tail." And then goes through the back room, and then the back door opens and goes through. But there was a whole sequence where he goes to the novelty shop and talks to a little spouting whale, which we never shot. Then we get to Janice and this whole thing about Solo, about Elia being betrayed on a mission, and I'll get to that. There was an entire flashback sequence that, because the Bond chase ran a little too long, um, we had to scrap a whole flashback sequence, which I'll talk about later. Now,
Mm.
some people say this seemed out of character for Napoleon, considering how sophisticated he is, but even in the original show, there's a sequence in third season where, there's a naked woman that they come across in Five Daughters Affair, and he does the same thing. So, it's not all that out of character for Solo to be acting more or less like a gentleman. um, and uh, yeah, Robert was actually having a great time doing this. Robert loves to do comedy, so anything along these lines, he has a fun time with. Um, yeah, remind me about Pennington Smythe's scarf a little later on. There was a lot of the Russian Cafe that was art directed. That was actually built. The facade. That's a Russian restaurant on Sunset Boulevard here in LA. And all the stuff that you see here is just the regular restaurant. They were really great about finding locations that would save them on the budget. Because if you tried to build this, it would be way, way too expensive. Again, Robert and David are it. I wish they had I wish the script story had spent more time keeping these two guys together because they really are magic as actors. The camaraderie and the basic chemistry between Robert and David, and then Robert had a great time doing. Both Robert and David had a great time doing these action sequences.
We saw Gail Honeycutt earlier. Do you remember Gail at all?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But was she quite
Everybody on the show was actually having a good time. They were yeah, I love Robert's fighting. It's just, by the way, I love Robert's fighting. So and then David and then Ilya with the Ilya roundhouse that was famous. This was one of my favorite scenes in
hmm,
the in
good
the
one?
whole show. That both of them are using their old fighting styles. And that was something that I had to discuss with the stunt coordinators to help. I would sit down and talk to the stunt coordinators as to what kind of moves Robert and David used during their stunt stuff during the old show. But yeah, everybody on the show was having a good time. I don't remember anybody who was like, angsty or having a bad time or wasn't showing up. This was shot. This was the Robert and David did this in one, all this, my screen just froze.
Yeah, I've got you. Can you hear me?
Oh, there it came back.
Okay.
All this was yeah. All this
Yeah.
was shot um in down this was shot in downtown LA, and they did it in one take. That's the thing about these guys. They have photographic memories as far as their lines go. They just read it once and they just go to town. This is shot from a station wagon driving down the street. And and I always thought to myself, what kind of a weird sensation would it be to be walking down the street and have Robert Vaughn and David McCallum as Napoleon and Ilya walking down the street, and then they just walk by you. It's like there's no indication that the film is going on or anything. There's just a station wagon with a camera sticking out the back, and these guys are just walking down the street. And this is just all ordinary people just wandering by. Nobody stops and goes, "All right, you're Robert Vaughn and David McCallum. What the hell? What are you doing here?" There's a couple of people, that just kind of like walked by and kind of noticed and kind of went, "Did I see what I saw?" But these are just
So would it
normal,
be a
everyday.
question of
Yeah, these are not extras. These are just normal. And they go up to this guy and order, and they told the worker at the hot dog stand
hmm,
here that they would be coming by and ordering a hot
yeah.
dog, and they just come up and order a hot dog, and in ADR we had to change the line because I think he has ketchup instead of mustard or one or the other. And I remember in the ADR session, we had to change the line. This is another location completely in downtown LA.
Hmm,
Um, uh, and these are extras behind because we had to reshoot this over and over again. Oh,
hmm,
not over and over, but we had to shoot it a couple of times. More technical kind of thing. But the other shot was just regular people just walking down, just walking down the street. Now, I think there's a few just regular people here in the background as well. Now, they're right here, they're talking about, oh, you quit, uncle. Now I came back, blah, blah, blah. Um, there was a whole flashback sequence that we were gonna shoot that had to be scrapped of Elia trying to rescue the girl, Janice betraying him, and the girl getting shot and killed, and Elia and the girl being chased by thrush agents, and and then Janice turns them over to the thrush agents, and they're kind of out in the woods, and And one of the reasons why I feel so bad about us not having been able to shoot that is that we had the original Thrush uniforms available. We had the original Thrush rifles. We had the original Uncle Special fully assembled, ready to go. We also had the original Man from Uncle Car ready to go for those sequences. So we were going to use all those original props, like I say, plus the Uncle car itself in those sequences, in the chase sequence and in the oh, and then we were going to, and then Elia, after the mission fails, goes into Waverly's office and does a prisoner inspired scene with Waverly banging on the table and resigning from Uncle, and we were going to build a section of Waverly's office, and we were going to use the original circular table from the show, the chairs, and rebuild Waverly's office. And it all got scrapped because of the overages on the James Bond sequence. But that was the stuff I was obviously that was the stuff I was really looking forward to. Here they've that's why David mentioned, that's why Elia says, what happened to all the beautiful women? Because they've just gotten their badges from this, from like a Del Floria type character. That's a photo of Leo G. Carroll in the back that I had that I think is in the script. It says there's a reference to Waverly, but I brought that personal photo in for Janice to have on her desk. Um, this is one of those James Bond kind of things that, a Z instead of Q. I was kind of like, "Oh, okay." Now on the table there is the new Uncle Special in its case. It's right in front of her. I don't know if we'll go back to that master shot, but in the script there was this small little cannon thing that was given to the guys, and this is in the script. The Uncle gun itself was not in the script, so it's not, it didn't get featured. But in this sequence, she goes, they say, "Where are our Uncle guns?" And she says, "They're in the Smithsonian, but I have this." And she shows them the case with the new Uncle Special, and she says, "Now I'll train you on this later." David picks up the gun and assembles it within about 10 seconds. Like, I don't need to be trained. I know how these things work. He assembles the new Uncle Special and then tosses it across to Robert, who caught it one handed perfectly and was like, "Yeah, we got this." And then the scene moved on to all this other stuff with and that's a little tracker thing that I made. And the guns and stuff on the table there, that crossbow kind of looking thing is something that I designed and built, and I just happened to have in my, my stock. So this was, of course, her reaction to Elia is the standard, reaction. That weird crossbow kind of thing on the table is mine. But there was, and then you can see the case on the table there with the Uncle Special. But it was a great scene, and the editor was like, "It's not in the editor was like, "It's not in the script. I don't know what to do with this. I need some more time. I'm cutting it out." And so that whole sequence got cut out, but that was pretty cool. This is the Biltmore Hotel, downtown LA. Um, in a sequence that is very, very reminiscent of like the old show. They really, there were moments where it really did capture the old show, and then at other times, just yeah, just kind of missed the mark. Now, the reason why, again, everybody was having a great time. It's again, and you can tell the energy. Just people are having a good time. Lots of, not a lot of impromptu stuff, but this sequence I always thought was one of the better sequences. very much out of the old show
A
with
nice touch of him, Kowalski being a little bit uncomfortable in the suit, um, fitting with the cummerbund is sort of not quite being a bit out of place, not as suave as Napoleon. That was
yeah,
quite a
exactly.
nice.
Yeah, that was that definitely a nice touch. And then Ilya getting to do one of his disguises and another voice, and again, very much along the lines of his old disguises from the original show. And
Mm,
what I was gonna say about Pennington Smythe, he has this little like ascot scarf kind of thing that he constantly wears. And in the script, it's a long crocheted scarf that's multicolored. And when Napoleon first meets him, Napoleon looks at the scarf like, huh. And and Pennington Smythe says, "You like my Doctor Who scarf?" So there's a Doctor Who reference
mm,
in the script where Pennington Smythe is supposed to be wearing the Tom Baker scarf from Doctor Who as his character quirk, and the
mm.
the costumer showed up on the day with this like little ascot. We were like, "Huh, that's not exactly Doctor Who," but all right, we don't have time for this. So, there was no way to get everybody just assumed, okay, she's going out and getting a Tom Baker scarf. And
Mm.
she, from their standpoint, a scarf's a scarf. And that's uh, the girl who just walked by is Michael's assistant.
Right.
And I can't think of her name offhand. Uh, Um, but yeah, here in this sequence, he was supposed to have a Tom Baker scarf on, and
Mm,
I personally, I was really looking forward to it. That we'd have a Doctor Who cross reference, but you know, they came up with they came up with that little ascot, and so the Doctor Who line got dropped. And again, as you know, these are not sets. These are all, there just wasn't a budget to build any sets. We were hoping to build a section of Waverly's office, but that was about it.
mm.
Um, and the
Yeah.
rest of this was just shot, at the Biltmore, in the Biltmore. There's the scarf. He says, "How do you like my Doctor Who scarf?" And this is what and this is what the costume department came up with. I was like,
It's good,
no.
isn't it? Judy Sloan is credited as assistant to. I don't know if that's relation to Michael,
I think it's
but
his
Judy Sloan.
I think maybe his sister. I'm not 100 I'm not 100% sure. There are some things that I'd have to go back and look at the some of my some yeah, I don't even know if that stuff would be on my call sheets.
Mm,
Um, yeah, there are a few things that are just kind of get slipped between the cracks. Um, and like this sequence here, David was up for doing like on the original show. David was always up for doing his own stunts. You know, so both of these guys, Robert and David, do as much of their stunt work as they possibly can. And
mm.
that's our stunt coordinator, Gary Jensen.
Oh. Mhm.
And why I remember all this stuff, I do not know.
Well, I suppose being with you because it's a dream come true, isn't it? Really. So unlike the cast and crew, it's not mundane to you. So hence why you've got that sort of detail 40 odd years later, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I say, I had to pinch myself on a daily basis. I'm going, am I here in a room and doing watching a fight scene with, Ilya Kuryakin and Robert Vaughn doing his like, his Irving Stahlmacher, you know, voice imitation from the old show. It's like it was weird. Yeah. Again, it was weird. Now I had fairly good street creds by the time I did this. I wasn't just a fan. By the time I did this, I had done, the effects on Piranha. Worked on Alligator. I'd worked on Halloween, the original Halloween, and I had just finished creating the Heartlight for ET in ET, which was doing great, which was doing big box office at the time. So I had so not only was I a fan, but I was accruing some status in the industry at the time. So it gave me a little buffer, so that people didn't think I was just a crazed fan. This is one of those, and again, this is one of those weird things that, Napoleon gets shot with a tranquilizing dart, but it's so, but it's kind of clunky. That's like on the old show, they just would shoot somebody and they just react, and you'd think that the dart, vanished, under their clothing or something. But, we kind of took a step back in the technology. Again, one take, we were in and out. This scene is it is my favorite scene in the whole show. And this is because originally this was supposed to be shot on a rooftop. In the script, it's on a rooftop, and the guys are freezing and they're listening in on a radio across from the room where they planted the bug. And we were getting a little tight on budget and tight on time. And I suggested to Michael, why don't we just put them back in Uncle headquarters and they can listen in from there? And since we're here in the bank building, we can just shoot it here. We don't have to go outside. We don't have to we don't have to like move production. And so it gave so um so this is one of those things where I actually got to like, create this scene. And it gave me a chance to, talk to David about doing the scene without his jacket on and showing off the shoulder holster, which I designed. And yeah, so this is one of my favorite scenes. It's like, okay, this is really like the old show, where you got the computers in the background, you got David in his white shirt, he's got the Uncle Special, he's got the shoulder holster, and Vaughn's in his tuxedo. And I was really, and the fact that, I suggested the fact that I suggested this scene. So I got a big kick out of being able to do this. Um, the shoulder holsters were made out of the originals were made out of leather. Because this was updated, I had a company make the new shoulder holsters out of ballistic nylon, which is something that was a new material, but was being used in backpacks. But this was like one of the very first uses of ballistic nylon to be used as a holster. And I went to a company called Action Pack and gave them the designs that I wanted. So it had that broad shoulder like the old Uncle shoulder holsters. And they built 5 or so shoulder rigs for me for the production. And then they did a modified version, which held the guns a little bit closer to the body, like a real armor would. And our deal was, if they made the shoulder holsters for free for the production, they had the ability to sell the shoulder holsters to the public. And what happened is that the shoulder holsters that were designed for Uncle with that slight modification that they did were actually picked up by U.S. Secret Intelligence agencies. as a holster for their operatives. So art imitating life, life imitating art. The shoulder holsters that were created for this show actually ended up being used by U.S. intelligence with that slight modification that they made. Um, this scene was actually kind of tough to watch while we were shooting it because it seemed a little out of character for Napoleon. Even if it just seemed that the chivalrous solo that we saw in the Vulcan affair, even pushed to the edge, this would never handle the situation like this. That this is more of a almost from Russia with Love, James Bond kind of situation. So this
Mm.
is there were a few things that I didn't quite feel were right. They were a little too Bondian as opposed to Uncle regarding the difference between Solo and Bond in character. And Dick Durock, he was having a good time. As with all these guys who were like playing villains, they're such sweethearts on in real life. Now, something I'm going to throw in here. Oh, that's Ray Austin
Oh,
doing
right.
some stunts. That
I think he must have forgotten.
that was a little insert shot that we did, but that's Ray Austin doing a
He
stunt.
must have forgotten about it when I spoke to him because
Yeah, and
he
this is
didn't even
me
reference that at all.
this is me as my Thrush agent character driving up, dropping off dropping off
Hmm.
Smythe. And there I go, driving away. And then David doing more of his character disguise stuff. Um, ah, there was something I was gonna. The helicopter. There's a there. Right, in a little bit. Yeah, that scene hasn't come up yet. It has to do with the helicopter. Again, Jeffrey Lewis, sweetheart. Everybody was having, everybody was having a good time. What was interesting is that then there we were back to the dam that shouldn't exist. This is the dam's actual control room.
Hmm.
This worked out really well. Um, the, during pre-production, the costume department. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit because each thing
Yeah.
brings up different stuff. So I try and go back where I can. This is shot in Las Vegas. This was actually a pretty nice scene with
Mm.
Solo and Kowalski finally kind of coming to grips with the old versus the new. Um, um, Trying to think of what I was.
Mm. And
Um,
and I think the Kowalski character
oh,
does become more likable as it goes on, doesn't he? So there's sort
yeah,
of a nice little sort of arc there.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
you were going to mention the
again,
costumes.
there's a thing about again, there's this overall kind of overlay of James Bond to the story, which
Mm.
I wish we'd been able to get away from. Um, Again, the story almost treats Uncle like MI6 and
Mm.
Bond and and like a co-agent working for MI6 or CIA. It doesn't, there's a little bit, again, there's a little bit too much Bond going on
Mm.
throughout the story. We originally Michael viewed the Five Daughters affair at MGM in the screening room before he started writing the script. So he kind of
Mm.
based the tone of Uncle on third season and then overlaid James Bond for the serious elements. And I we did I we um we watched the Minus X affair with a crew, watched the Minus X affair to kind of do a quick refresher on Uncle. This sequence, I believe, was actually directed by David McCallum. I think David went out. We originally Ilya was going to find the thrush location by using a hang glider, and he was going to hang glide into the cave by following a jeep or something, and then the hang glider got destroyed in a windstorm. So they had to come up with a new way of finding the thrush location. So David went out with a small crew, and I think my gut tells me that David actually directed this sequence, because basically they said, well, let's just have him find trail the guys. He finds a swimming pool and he goes into a swimming pool and ends up in the caves. So that was a last minute thing that doesn't exist in the script. That was like, well, how are we gonna get around the fact that the hang glider that we had just got ruined in the windstorm? So that whole sequence in the pool was a last minute patch on trying to figure out how people end up here in the chalk mine. And this is where Fred Conenkamp and his lighting team gets to do Uncle. The reds in the cave, are just typical Fred Conenkamp, and his main assistant Gene from the original show, put together their old team to light the show, and most of it's pretty just regular. But once we got into the cave here, it really got into looking like third season Uncle, where in cave
Mm.
sequences you got these splashes of red. So this is really a throwback to the original show. Um, uh, yeah, we had this. So David's sopping wet. Now, David did not want to wear a turtleneck because of having an older chin. He didn't think he could carry the look. So David refused to wear a turtleneck through the show, even though every once in a while somebody would say, well, Ilya needs to wear a turtleneck. He'd go, I'm not wearing one. But they finally gave in and decided he should at least wear it for at least one sequence. And he knew that if he wore the turtleneck for this sequence, that he was going to be getting out of the turtleneck really quick.
Mm.
So he takes the turtleneck off here. So it's just that one shot at the pool and then here where he's wearing a turtleneck, because he just didn't want to wear a turtleneck. He just didn't think he could carry the look
Mm.
anymore. But everybody was like begging him, oh come on, he's got to wear a black turtleneck here somewhere. And the stuff with the bomb here, these are all inserts that were done in post-production. We spent a couple of days in a shop in Burbank, doing these inserts, and the prop department built this little insert panel for him to do all the wire cutting, and we based it loosely on the interior of the nuclear bomb used in Goldfinger. We thought that was kind of a cool thing with all the spinning dials
I,
and
I
wires
did
and
think
stuff.
there was a resemblance, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that came from. It was like, do it like the Goldfinger bomb, since we don't know what the interior of the bombs really look like. So that was the inspiration there, and I love the fact that the Uncle communicators are always waterproof. I don't know how that works. Um, HK again, Goldfinger, spinning dial thing. This is the HK Uncle special with its silencer. The HK was chosen over the P38. I'd hoped that maybe we'd get a P5 for the Uncle Special in designing it. But the prop department had to deal with the armory guys to have the HKs.
Hmm.
So again, in the script there was no Uncle Special. I, I got when I got brought on as a technical advisor, I agreed that I would try everything I could to, spice up the show wherever I could and make suggestions and stuff. And so I offered to, on my dime, have to design the new Uncle Special, and I had friends of mine, Bruce Wegman and David Heilman, do the milling. I did the designs of the gun, and they did the actual construction of the new Uncle Special. And then I brought the Uncle Special in and showed it to Michael, and he said, "Great! Now that we've got it, we'll use it." But if I hadn't made it, there wouldn't have been a new Uncle Special. What I was going to say about the helicopter earlier, and then I realized it was actually this scene, and that is this again is out in this is out in Vegas, just outside the prison. If you turned the camera around and looked the other way, you'd be standing right at the entrance of the prison, and this was shot right after they did the escape sequence from the prison. And what happened here is that Anthony and Dick get into the helicopter. The helicopter flies away, and it wasn't intended that the helicopter would get so close to the car, number one. So everybody freaked on that. And then what happened is the helicopter went over the mountain, flew off flew off over the mountain and disappeared over the horizon. It did not come back for like another 15, 20 minutes, and there was no communication with the helicopter, and everybody was freaking out that what the hell's happened to the helicopter. And we were honestly getting really worried that something had happened. And it had, when it went over the mountain, it got caught in like a downdraft, and they almost crashed. And they were trying to recover from the incident, and the helicopter pilot was trying to find a safe way around the mountain to get back to production. And when it finally arrived, everybody we were all so freaked out that something horrible had happened. But they did have a almost a near incident with
Hmm.
Anthony and Dick being in the helicopter going over the ridge. You can see the wind that they're
Hmm.
dealing with here. Well, it was a huge gust because, like I say, the helicopter goes over the mountain, and I don't remember. I think it cuts well before they go over the mountain because that would just, that was really long. But in any case, oh, and I guess it does cut here. Wow, that whole sequence is gone. The helicopter actually came around, touched. Solo was leaving in the car. The helicopter comes around and actually touches the top of the car almost with one of the landing gear as kind of like a goodbye thing, and then takes off over the mountains. So the irony is that there's a whole sequence there that was shot that was deleted, and one of the scariest things ever. You see how Robert like twisted the antenna there? That was the oh my God, he still knows how to use the uncle communicator. And of course, back to the you see the shoulder holster here, and it's got that, so it holds in the right place. It has that under the shirt thing that David McCallum's old shoulder holster had from the original show. This is in the this is in the chalk mines,
Hmm.
and obviously they're standing on I won't say obviously, but they're standing on apple boxes. in this particular case here. And again, we've got the red stuff, and again, David and Simon were having a
Yeah, Simon Williams,
yeah
yeah.
yeah Simon was having a uh, a good time. There's a shot here where Elia gets his explosive out of his shoe, and this is the only time in my life I get to play Elia Kuryakin because we were doing these as inserts. We needed somebody to do the hand insert of getting the explosive out of his shoe. I got to do the hand insert of it's my hand taking the bomb out of the shoe that we did in the insert shots. So that was the only time in my life I got to play Ilya Kuryakin. Um, Now, what happens in this sequence is that um, uh, no, I've forgotten. Of course, the bomb explodes and the pipe releases, and It's the stunt guys that are hanging from the pipe, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But the one that's a sign. There's a sign that I made. Again, I was helping out the art department wherever I could, and this was something that they had specially made by the by the prop house that they were using. So this was, if memory serves me correctly, this Uncle Attaché case was specifically made for the show, and I don't know whatever happened to it. This is one of those just kind of went back into the prop house and never saw it again. Um, Yeah, and again, there's Robert really hits Napoleon really well in some scenes, and then gets a little too grim in others. Um, but but in general, they were both really on board. Uh, Ironically enough, Robert would ask me questions, whereas David wouldn't. David felt like if we don't know something, we'll just make it up, and then it'll become canon. So David didn't really think, it really didn't bother about stuff like that. And yeah, I think he kind of thought I was kind of a. I thought he kind of thought I was a little odd in being such a big fan. It's like, don't take it so seriously. Well, we'll just make it up. Robert, on the other hand, was one of those people that would come to me and say, like we were in Uncle Headquarters sequence, and I'd be talking to a friend, and suddenly Robert would come out of nowhere and come while prepping a scene, and he'd come out of nowhere and go, Bob, what section am I in? I went, huh? Oh, yeah, section two, operations and enforcement. He goes, okay, all right, I was just checking, just checking. Then he'd go off and, do his thing. And of course, there's big padding in that truck. He just landed in. And this is my guess. Yeah, I think this is my guest shot as, let's see. And again, David does does as much. There you go. There I am playing Ilya Kuryakin for a moment.
Nicely
And that's
done.
just a red piece of paper that we hung up and lit. And again, that's just an insert that we did on our insert days in Burbank. And there I go. I get to flick the flick the thing. So that's my moment. Um, so David, like I say, Robert was more like, I don't I just want to make sure I get this all right, and I'm not sure I'm remembering this correctly. So he'd ask me things occasionally about that what would Napoleon do, and what would Napoleon do in a situation like this, whereas David was more of a I know everything. Okay, now here, this knocked him out. The stunt guy, as the pipe comes down and hits him on the head, it knocked him cold. And everybody like rushed over, and in the I think it was Gary who was on that end of the pipe, and it caught him across the side of the head and across his shoulder, and it took him out. Um, So that was the closest incident we had with somebody really get. Oh, ironically enough, yeah, our stunt guy got knocked out doing that scene, but one of the grips shattered a his ankle walking around in the chalk mine. He slipped on one of the on one of the boulders and got his ankle caught between a couple of chalk chunks and twisted and shattered his ankle. And that was, I think, our major injury on the whole show was that one of the lighting crew shattered his ankle during this. And there was a sequence with Robert jumping off the back of the truck and assembling the Uncle Special. But the editor cut it out because, again, there were a lot of things like that. Oh, assembling a gun, who needs to see this? So it got cut out. And for me, hey, having Robert Vaughn playing Napoleon solo with a Uncle Special that I designed, I was like over the moon. It was like, hey, I just finished doing E.T.'s Heartlight, but the fact that Robert Vaughn's doing Napoleon solo and he's got my Uncle Special, now that's the best. So I think that's why I remember this stuff. Now I wasn't around for this because this is again second unit. Just doing their again, I hate to say it, the James Bond, the James Bond sequence. Now, Wardrobe had a choice. They had a choice of two colors because that's what was available to them from the rental house. They either had orange or blue, and originally, um, so they asked, which side should get which. Should we give the orange to the Thrush agents or to the Uncle agents, during this attack sequence? And Thrush on the original show, it had different colors for different reasons on their uniforms occasionally. So I recommended that Thrush get the orange ones and the Uncle team get the blue outfits due to the fact that and there's my guest appearance. That particular day, we didn't have a stunt guy on on set, so I volunteered to get punched out by Napoleon. I have a stunt background. That's how I started out. Was doing stunts and then segued uh, into makeup effects after that because it was a lot less dangerous. But yeah, people say, how come the uncle teams are dressed in thrush uniforms? Well, I have to take the hit on that because I thought that an Uncle Assault team in orange just didn't make any sense. So I
No.
recommended that thrush be the orange. Orange. It also tied in with the orange lightning bolt that Herman's people had come up with for the new thrush, the new thrush insignia. So I figured people would figure out that okay, the good guys are in blue and the bad guys are in orange. Now Robert had broken his ankle several months previous to this, and he really had to struggle to be able to run for these sequences. And he was actually rather proud of himself that he was able to be as active as he was during these sequences because he was still recovering from a broken ankle. Um, so that's the kind of dedication he has. This was not easy for him. Um, and of course, Robert, as on the original series, spends all of his time just reading. So he's most of the time he's just sitting in his chair reading, which actually makes it kind of, he's always been famous. He's always been famous for being rather quiet on the set, just spending time reading. Sometimes it's kind of tough to start a conversation with him because you always feel like you're interrupting him. And all this
Mm.
caves, again, this is a chalk mine, but there's, some cave stuff that's actually in the dam that is that that's pretty cool. Um, then we're going to get into uh, this fight sequence eventually with Elia and Janice, and I went over, like I mentioned earlier, that I went over with the stunt guys how Robert and David fight in the original series, which I'll get back to now that we're back here at the dam. Stuff at the dam, more James Bondian stuff, a la You Only Live Twice and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I don't think we ever saw anything like this on the original Uncle show. Um, um, and here you can see the orange, the orange lightning bolt on you know, the new thrush insignia, which is why I recommended the orange go to the thrush agents. And I don't know whose hand that is doing the inserts. It might be Nigel Watts. Nigel Watts was our producer, and Nigel has since passed away. I don't know what from. He was one of the younger guys on the crew. I was actually surprised to hear that he had passed away, and I don't know what he passed away from. Yeah, but that kind of took me by. That really did kind of take me by surprise. Of course, I was talking to you about the scarf. Um, and obviously, in a way, they really couldn't have done the. Yeah, I think Tom Baker's scarf would have probably eventually gotten in the way and gotten a little bit too in your face. But I was telling you earlier about I worked with the stunt coordinator Gary to understand some of the Elia and Napoleon fight stuff. Phil was the stunt double for Robert, and we'll see his fight later on. But for this sequence, um, I mentioned to Gary, our stunt coordinator, that on the old show, especially in third season, Elia would do a lot of, and second season would do a lot of a gymnastic kind of moves. There's a thing in Dippy Blonde Affair where he does a kip and jumps to his feet, and in third season he does a lot of like does a lot of gymnastic kind of moves here and there, jumping up with his legs, grabbing people around their neck, and then flipping over and then flipping over. So there's a bit of gymnastics sometimes to Elia's fight scene. So I mentioned that would be an interesting nod for Elia's character. And as we get into this, there's a shot of Elia kind of doing a roll flip backwards kind of thing, which is which comes from that conversation that I had with the stunt guys about seeing if they could, add some kind of gymnastic move to Elia's stuff. And again, this is a real chalk mine um, that was active at the time. We were just in an offshoot. We were just in an offshoot part of the cave, and everything everything behind the camera looked like David's outfit at the moment.
Mm.
Everything was just dusty and you know dusty and crappy and dirty, and it was, and also it was cold. And I think everybody kind of remembers that it was freezing in these caves. These guys were doing okay, um, especially Jeffrey here, who had his turtleneck on because it was cold down there. So they're talking about this. Yeah, there you go, and he shoots there, tackle. And there's the little flip. It's
Yeah.
an homage to the old series. I was hoping they'd do a little bit more, but there you go. And what they're fighting about is that, there's the flashback that we didn't shoot
Mm.
where Elia trying to protect the girl, and he there you go. Oh, protect the girl, and Janice betrays him, and the girl gets killed. And Elia goes in and yells at Waverly and quits and slams his gun and his holster down on Waverly's table and spins it around and says, "I quit." Um, which I was really looking forward to those sequences. I was really sad. This is the actual um, corridors in Hoover Dam, which are really super cool. This stuff that's been cut out of the rock. And you'd think that it was a set, but that was just the real deal. And Keenan Wynn I had worked with briefly on Piranha. Ironically enough, I and Chris Wallace made some chewed up legs for Keenan Wynn for Piranha.
Mm.
So this was the second time that I had worked with Keenan Wynn, and um,
Was it a nice guy to work with?
yeah, yeah, and he makes a comment about his hearing aids in this, which he actually had. So, Michael just wrote that into the script that, Keenan uses a hearing aid. So he just added that as part of the character to count to yeah, to yeah, yeah. Those are his real hearing aids. So he just wrote those into the script.
Hmm.
And again, this is real stuff here. This is the real deal.
And you can see a crew member behind the door, can't you? And they just sort of duck as
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
only recently saw
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Now we're back at Caesars in the Marilyn Monroe suite, if I remember correctly. But it's definitely the suite. Um, and Phil, I can't remember his last name. Phil doubles for Robert in this, and I had to go through with Phil on how Robert sometimes crosses his left arm over his right arm when he throws a punch, um, and other things that Robert sometimes does in regards to how he throws punches and stuff. So um, this was shot, like just really quick, no retakes. This was choreographed by Gary, and again, Phil takes these, takes the takes the hard hits, but Robert's always been really good about doing really, about doing fight scenes. Um, and of course, the explosive watch was just an air ram. It's so funny, when you're on set, because all you're hearing is these big poofs. There's no explosion. And again, with the fights, you don't nobody makes contact, so there's no impact when you're doing a fight scene, and there's no big sound or explosion during this stuff. It's just a big poof of a big poof of air, and everybody has to rely on their acting to get it through. Um, and again, as much as I love to see, Robert get in, Robert do a really good Napoleon solo fight, that felt much more like out of a James Bond film. With Solo,
Hmm.
taking on the henchman at the very at the very end. And again, I wish. Oh, now he's actually stepping over my body. That's a shot that was cut out. He comes around. I'm playing the guard, and because we didn't have a stunt guy, and I was playing a guard at that point, and Solo comes in and knocks the guard out, and for time they just jumped over, and they just jumped over it. Also, the fact that I had already been knocked out. I think people figured, no, we've seen it. We've seen enough of Bob. Um, and yeah, again, a lot of a lot of comments from the fans are, it would have been nice if Vaughn and McCallum had actually, if Solo and Elia had been together a lot more, as opposed to, as opposed to this, which is very much like the old series. I mean, there's probably more episodes where Solo and Elia are in different ends of the earth, just communicating by communicator about what they're doing. So this is very true to the original series. But if you're doing a one-off, a one-off show where you want to see these guys together and see Elia and Napoleon doing their thing, it was kind of, it was a little sad that it wasn't tailored a little bit more to keep these actors together. Um, but there you go. It was all, as they say, it was all easier. It was all a lot easier 15 years ago. And I can't even think about how many years it's been since this was created. And now here we are. Back to the Russian, tea room. Um, Again, it's always nice to see the Solo and
Yeah, yeah,
Ilya get back
41 years,
together.
isn't it now?
Yeah, yeah. I don't even want to think about it. Now here we get to the end, and there's another graphic coming up that I did of the president's plane um, being missing. Um, but um, I talked to Michael about the music that should have gone over that we could use on the end sequence here, which was Meet Mr. Solo, which ended almost every episode of Uncle. And we looked into it, and there wasn't anything in the budget for licensing one more piece of music. So Gerald Freed, who had done the original music, who came on board to do the music on this, came up with an original piece of music because we couldn't afford to do Meet Mr. Solo, and that's why Meet Mr. Solo isn't at the end of this. Um, Mike Post, a really prolific composer at this particular time, was originally the top contender for doing the music for Uncle, but I put together a presentation reel and gave it to Michael about the fact that Gerald Freed had done most of the music for the original Uncle, and Gerald was available. And Michael was like, "Well, if you're recommending, Gerald on this, we'll go with him." And here we go for the very end. Um, we knew we should have ended with you know, um, Meet Mr. Solo, but we couldn't afford it. And though I get credit here at the end uh, um, as technical advisor, I was really working as like an associate producer in the same kind of capacity that George Lear did on the original show. And so I had my hands in almost everything that had to do with the show, and I was and then I made sure that we got that in. There was a big note that I sent to
Yeah.
everybody. We got to thank the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement, and my throat.
Well
um,
done.
so I know you didn't get a chance to throw any questions in there. Sorry about that. But I, this,
No. I mean, it was far better for you to kind of lead with it, really. It flowed very well, I thought.
um,
I have a few audience questions
sure.
to finish off. Do you want a drink or anything before we
No,
do those, or
no, I'm
do you,
good.
do you, you
I'm
you
good.
take a little bit?
I'm gonna take a swig of coffee here and just kind
Oh
of
yeah, yeah, yes,
catch
yes,
my
yes.
breath.
Well
And I'm
deserved.
trying to think
Well
of,
deserved.
I'll see if I can think of things that I missed because it's I had to, I'm trying to hit the salient points of different scenes, knowing what's coming up next, and trying not to kind of get lost.
Well, I think when I watched it yesterday, it really does go along at quite a pace. There's a lot of stuff going on in that night. So, so yes, I know what you mean. We had a question about what was it like working with Ray Austin?
Ray was like Ray's kind of like the epitome of it of an English gentleman. You know, everything's very prim and proper, very erudite is what I would say about Ray. Very erudite, very knowledgeable, um, easy to, easy to work with. There were times where I would make suggestions on stuff that he could have blown up about at me because I would contradict him on stuff here and there. I didn't try and contradict him. I just wanted to give him the accurate information. And there were times where I would say, but they would do this in a scene like this, and he'd go, "That's okay. This is the new uncle. Just don't, we're going to do it my way." Okay. you know so we never had a blow up. There were a couple of times where I think there was only maybe two times where he said, "Bob, we're not doing it that way. I know that may be the old show, but this is new uncle." Okay, all right. And
Hmm.
I kind of tuck my tail between my legs and go hide in a corner for a little while. Then we get back, then we get back at it. But I liked Ray a lot. Um, um, he was very straightforward, easy to work with, knew
Hmm.
what he wanted to do with the scenes. There was never any like, you know, uh, he never I never saw him get angry with anybody. He's just really even keeled, just very knowledgeable. He did look at with the same as a lot of the people on the show. He looked at it more like a James Bond adventure than an Uncle adventure. But that's just the way it goes.
Hmm.
It was kind of like Michael wrote it as kind of a James Bond adventure with Uncle kind of washed over it. He knew the characters of Solo and Ilya, and the dialogue really sparkled. But he didn't delve very deeply into the uncle mythos of what made it different than Bond.
Hmm.
So I could only push just so I only pushed just so far, and I kind of knew my place. And like I was saying earlier, with David, he just had his own way of doing things. Robert, he was more like, am I doing this right? According to, because my memory's not serving me all that well. Whereas David was like, I may not remember something, but that doesn't matter. We'll just make it up. So
Hmm.
so we'll just do what we want to do. So, in a way, um, um there were definitely differences. And David, and the thing about working with David and Robert is I'd always been a big Uncle fan, and I had gone to the set of the original series, and I'd hung out and I'd watched him work as Solo and Elia in the original series. And I always found it fascinating that they still did the same thing on Return, which was they have the opposite personalities of their characters. So, you know, so when they're in character, Solo's the gregarious one and the charming one, and Elia's the introverted one and the quiet one and the one that studies and etc. And then the camera stops. And on the old show, and working with them and actually working with them on Return, the minute the camera stops, they flip flop. David becomes gregarious, is investigating things on the set, learning about stuff, chatting with people. Robert goes into his introverted, I'm going to sit in the chair and just read. Don't bother, kind of like a don't, kind of like a don't bother me. I'm kind of in my own world kind of thing. So it was always fascinating that even on Return, they were still the same way. It was just like like a light switch.
Mm.
Okay, flip the character treats.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was speaking to Luciana Paluzzi a few years ago, and we oh to trap a spy, and she didn't really sort of have too much to really talk about Robert Vaughan. I think maybe because he was kind of sitting by himself reading, and maybe sometimes that he may have come across as being a bit
Oh,
antisocial, or perhaps why is he not doing that? So there's a few people that I spoke to that kind of I haven't got anything bad to say about the man, but they don't really have much to really get to talk about. So I think that may be to perhaps just his nature. I think just being more introverted as a person.
I think I think so. And knowing, having seen Vaughn, especially having seen Vaughn uh, in solo while having seen Vaughn while working as solo, and having been around Sean Connery with him being James Bond,
Mm,
it's a totally different thing. Vaughn goes into his I'm just going to be alone. Sean, when the camera's off, is gregarious, practical joker, charming, interfaces with everybody, hangs with the crew, et cetera, et cetera. So if Luciana is comparing, Sean to Vaughn, that is two different personality types. And I could see where she would
oh
warm
yeah.
up to Sean a lot more because
Mm,
he's just a practical, he's a practical joker. He's just got the charm on all the time. Sean's one of those.
mm,
But the thing is that, Robert, when you're around Robert, he's a good actor, and when he's in character, he's very charming. But Sean, you know, again, is it just because of Luciana comparing the two working together?
mm. Yeah.
Sean's one of those person that I've experienced where I was waiting in a room to watch dailies in Vegas, not in Vegas, but in Palm Springs, and we're just kind of all sitting around, and all of a sudden you just kind of feel like there's a disturbance in the force. This is weird. You kind of turn around and Sean has entered the room.
Mm,
Sean is just one of those kind of people.
yeah.
He has that magnetic charisma thing, life force around him that when he enters a room, you kind of feel it. You don't even
Yeah.
have to know he's there. It's just kind of like, oh, something's, what is that? You kind of look around and go, oh, it's Sean. He just entered the room.
Mm,
So some people are like that. Just Sean Connery is just, he was just a in a way, just kind of a force of nature.
mm,
And I've never experienced that with any other. I've met all the, have I met all? Yeah, I've met all the actors who have played Bond, but I've never gotten one of that kind of visceral electricity in the air from any of them except for Sean.
mm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Just having the other questions. One of the audience members was watching the film on VHS, a Channel 5 video from 1987. I have a feeling I got that on eBay when I first discovered the
Right.
film. I don't think I've still got it, so that was quite interesting. Um, I did meet George a few years ago, and I got a Man from Uncle item signed. Said to him, "Was it good to be back in?" The James Bond role, and he was very sort of dismissive about the whole thing, and it was just a job of work to him. I don't think he ever really, although he regrets, I think it's purely for saving face and maybe the paychecks. I don't think he ever really valued the character in the way that, say, Roger Moore did. So he was sort of quite not dismissive about his appearance in this, but it was just one of those things he did a long time ago. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I could also see where, again, I was talking to you about the Equalizer, and I could see where
mm,
that time of Uncle being Bond and the
mm.
possibility of Equalizer being an entire show for him, kind of going south, kind of was like, I could see where,
Yeah,
you know,
I don't think George Lazenby had the best reputation really, and spending a bit of time with the man sort of 5 years ago, I don't think he hasn't really it changed that much perhaps from when he was making the Bond film. So I've got a feeling if they had made the series, he might have been fired at some point. Just
yeah,
he didn't quite seem sort of an although he's a great actor and very good in what he does, but I think made it difficult for him to do. McNee, what was McNee like when the cameras weren't rolling?
okay. I'm gonna, before we get into McNee, I'm just gonna make one more thing about, Michael Sloan was also right after Uncle.
Mm,
Um, Michael Sloan did The Master with Lee Van Cleef and Sho Kosugi. And there was one episode where David McCallum starred as a terrorist, and George Lazenby came back as JB and reprised his role again. And we brought out the Aston Martin. So it was James, so it was George and the Aston Martin. And, in the script, he's JB, but in this final, in the final thing, he's called Mallory or whatever, but he's basically, Bond with David McCallum again, doing the same, doing it again, but this time with McCallum as the villain. Now, Patrick McNee, again, what can you say about, what can I say about Patrick McNee other than he is Steed? You know,
mm,
I can't there's, to me, he's just John Steed, even in real life. He just is that English gentleman that's very courteous, very, you know, very, very nonchalant. Nothing, nothing, nothing ruffles his feathers.
mm,
He's just, uh, he's just a really nice guy, and like Ray, the epitome of like of an English gentleman. I worked with Patrick on Return of Uncle. I worked with him on a short-lived series called Gavilan. And then I worked with him on a thing called Superforce. So I've had three projects with Patrick, and he's just always a terrific gentleman. And I dropped in to say hello to Patrick once at his beach house, uh, as a fan. Before I'd
mm.
worked with him, I knew where he lived in Malibu because I was a Malibu person. And I, as a fan, I did something which you're not supposed to do, which is drop in on somebody, knock on their door and go,
Mm.
"Hi, I just wanted to say hello." And so I dropped in on Patrick's duplex in Malibu one day. I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. I've never met Patrick, so I'm just gonna knock on his door and see what happens. And this
Mm.
was about 1969, so it was right after the Avengers. Right after the Avengers. Um, and who should answer the door but Diana Rigg? And I'm like,
Oh.
No, that's not that's not what I expected. I dropped in to say hi to Patrick, and she goes, well, Patrick's not here at the moment. He's in Palm Springs, and he's just loaning out his place to me. Hi. And so I had a little chat with Diana Rigg and said, well, I'll say hi to Patrick when when he gets back in. And I went on my merry way, and that was my only time I ever ran into Diana Rigg was
Oh, yeah, that's
was it
lovely.
was at Patrick's beach house.
Well, yeah,
I
that's a
was
great
like,
moment.
because I that yeah, I was like I was like, it's Emma Peel. I didn't expect this. This does not compute. Wait a minute. Okay.
I did see Diana Rigg on stage a couple of times, and of
Mhm.
course, a fantastic actress. But in the years since, I would go to stage doors and get autographs and do it at that particular time. But I do
Right.
get the feeling with Diana, had I done it, I might be disappointed. So I think it was best not to, because I think she was always polite to her fans, but I think she was. I imagine she's one of those people that would have come up the stage door and wanted to run away quite quickly, really.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so just to finish up, did you? No question that came in. Do you remember working with Gerald Fried and what was he? What was he like?
Um, I love Gerald Fried. Number one, I
Mhm.
love his number one. I love the music that he did for Uncle. There were times where it didn't work. It got a little too hokey, but in general, he
Mm,
set the tone for the music for Uncle, which is why why I made the effort to promote him on the return of Uncle. The irony is
mm,
the irony is that I promoted him as the person who should do the Uncle score, but I don't think that the score is up to his standards. It kind of harks back with the bongos and here and there of the old show, but it doesn't have the energy and it doesn't have the remarkable. I was hoping that Gerald would come up with something like his score from the Alexander the Greater affair, which is just
mm,
spectacular. And what we got was kind of his musical versions of the retract stuff he did for the movie versions of Uncle.
mm,
Like one of our spies is missing the music that he did for for the theatrical release. So
mm,
um, I was I though I love Gerald's stuff and I love Gerald and I've met Gerald and he came out to I've helped with interviews with Gerald. Gerald came out and helped support the boutique Man from Uncle 50th anniversary convention that I put together, and we had a great time. So I have nothing but admiration for Gerald himself and his commitment to Uncle and how much he enjoyed doing Uncle.
mm,
I was hoping that the score for Return of Uncle would be better. From my standpoint, would be more energetic, more, just more like one of the episodes than the feature film than the Uncle movies that were put out at that time. Now I went to the scoring
mm,
session because like I said, I had my fingers in everything that was going on, and it was a huge it was the biggest. It was a huge orchestra, like 26, not huge, but it was like 26 pieces, 30 some odd piece. It was a big orchestra, and he scored it really. For some reason, it sounds like a really small conservative score for
Hmm.
some reason. I don't know, I had a great time sitting at the scoring session, listening to it all being scored live. There's nothing like a being there at a live concert with the stuff, the Uncle theme blaring and the incidental music and stuff. I and So like I say, I've enjoyed Gerald's work throughout the
Hmm.
years on a lot of stuff that he's done. I was just I was just let's put it this way. I was mildly disappointed in the score for Return. I was hoping it would just be more impactful, more energy. Um, but I am glad that Gerald did the show,
Hmm.
because at least it echoed the original show, the theme, and the use of the bongos and different stuff. But I, it it just slightly, for me, it just slightly missed the mark of what it could have been. Though though like I say, I love I love Gerald Fried. I was very sad at his recent passing.
You say it's a very nice connection to the old, and there is a lot in the score that is very familiar, of course, as you said, but the music does date it, the film, I think, a little bit as well. There's a bit of a overly 80s vibe, I think, to it. And I know when I spoke to Ray Austin, we were going through what I was just about to ask you now, is sort of how it kind of holds up as a piece, and he was saying that it has, I think, in but I think Ray ultimately is was quite happy with the film. And Ray did send me a picture. I don't know if you've probably seen it, but it's I think it's at the wrap for the film, and he's jumping in midair, and it's the Uncle Corridor with the United Network Command. And you seen that picture?
No, I don't think I have.
I'll send it to you. And but yeah, I think it's so. Do you are you happy, good reunion film as they go? And what did you think you succeeded in what you wanted to do back then?
I look back on it, and it it does, I look back on it and think about all the battles that I lost and the battles
Mm.
that just turned out the way that they did. And in general, in general, what was it is a pretty good I'll just put it this way. Uh, Overall, you couldn't ask for a better team to try and recreate a show like Uncle. Getting the original actors, getting the original composer, getting the DP, the director of photography,
Mm.
the key people that gave you the look of the original series. I just wish that the story was much more of a Man from Uncle story and less of a James Bond story.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I,
I you know so as far and the fact that you know the fact that the budget shows, the lack of budget shows, but overall, I think everybody gave it their best shot from their own from their own perspective. Michael, his, mine, Ray's, Robert, David, and though I have my qualms about the show, and being such a big fan, I have a particular vision of what I wanted it to look like. I have to admit that as a reunion film, it's actually one of the it's actually one of the best reunion reunion films, overall, as far as what was delivered and what we were able to, what we were able to create. I I can't complain about the fact about because of the simple fact that Michael was willing to bring on a quote unquote technical advisor to be there every day to help people, connect it to the original show is pretty
Mm.
remarkable. So Michael in his own way was giving it his all. And it overall was, a great a great experience. And it as a reunion film, it delivers in spades. For me, I would, like I said before, I just wished it delivered a little bit more of the uncle mythos in its storytelling and a little less being James Bond. But that's just me being picky, you know? Because what didn't we get? We got, like I said, we got Gerald Fried and Fred Conenkamp and David and Robert and the general, the general look, the general tone of the show. Um, you know, um, we did, you know, overall we did pretty good.
A great supporting cast as we talked about, and it serves as a lovely bookend to the show. It's a much more satisfying ending than a series that was cancelled halfway through its full series. So it gives the fans that closure that we didn't have back then.
Yeah, well, Seven Wonders, yeah, I mean,
And
ironic,
it's funny how
yeah.
many
So
times I
yeah,
yeah.
so part of the irony is I was there on the day that they, I was there on the day that they shot those final scenes for the original show
Oh.
at what you call it at LAX. So for me it was especially, cathartic to kind of personally see a new ending to Robert
Mm.
and David's, interpretation of those characters. As you say, it was a much more satisfying end than watching Waverly, Solo, and Elia grimly, walk up to the jet and take off at the end of Seven Wonders of the World affair, which was kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I guess we're just going out on kind of a grim note.
Mm.
Speaking of the old series, I for one would have loved for the last sequence of the original show to have been the end of the other two-parter, which was Prince of Darkness, where Solo and Elia are walking down the corridor with each other, and they say, "Well, what's new?" "Well, there's the plot to, melt the polar ice cap, and 5 scientists are missing, and the world's about to end." And Napoleon going, "Oh, well, I guess I'll take the day off." Freeze frame. End of show. End of series. And I always thought that that would have been a much better way to go out as far as the
Mm.
series goes. But I was happy to see, right now the end of Return, where,
Mm.
are you guys available? Yeah, I guess so. And then Michael went on in the early '90s to write a sequel to Return of Uncle called Twilight Spies, and shopped that around for years, trying to get Uncle back up and running. And that was pretty much active right up until the time that John Davis bought the rights in
Oh.
'94 and went on to develop the feature film.
Mm.
And that was the end of when John Davis bought the rights, that was the end of Michael's second return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E, which had Solo as a gambler on a riverboat on the Mississippi, and Elia as an engineer, keeping the engines running, and them ending up in a castle with a huge battle and stuff. So yeah, Michael, you know, the series, that never the TV movie did enough in the ratings to warrant a series, but CBS decided that they just weren't in the spy business. So they turned
Sure.
down the idea of doing a Uncle series, and went ahead with the Master with Michael. But there always I always say that there always seems to be an attempt to bring Uncle back
Mm.
at some point or another. There's always been some kind of activity until the recent until the Man from U.N.C.L.E feature film. After that, did not, though it was a good film and well made, it was up against Mission Impossible and Out of Compton out of that at that time, and didn't do anything at the box office. It's now got a fan following on streaming and doing really well and made its money back. But because it didn't quite, rouse anything at the box office. I haven't heard of any, you know, remake or revamp stories about Uncle for quite a while, which
Mm.
up until the movie, there was always somebody, whether it was Norman Felton trying to bring it back with Sam Rolfe, or Michael Sloan, getting his thing off the ground, or they had the Bond writer, Richard Maybaum have a pass at it,
Mm.
doing a version of the script. But there always, up until the feature film got released, there always seemed to be somebody somewhere doing an attempt. There was an episode on the A Team that was the Cry Uncle episode with Frank Lupo doing producing that show, and even the producers on A Team, after they did that episode, put a thing into the works to try and bring Uncle back, and
Mm.
that didn't gel. That didn't gel either. So, I'm hoping that somebody somewhere, you know, does it, puts it, you know, brings it up from being on the back burner, and you know tries another hand at it, because it's too good. As far as I'm concerned, it's too good a format and universe, um, to not exploit a little bit more. Of course, the recent film, um, I talk about something that was really off in its own alternative universe. Though it was a good film and well produced. Boy, it sure didn't bother with the format of the Uncle organization or anything
Mm.
else.
Well, yeah, like you, I quite like the film, but as you say, it's more of a setting up for Uncle things in the second, third sort of film. So it's kind of very
Yeah,
loosely, but it's like the Avengers movie in '98. It's although that had a much more, very complicated history of what happened with that one. But once a film fails based on a series, it's kind of difficult to kind of the studios don't seem to care whether it was good or not. If it doesn't make the money, you know,
yeah,
um,
yeah, that's
nor
what
do
they
they
got to
care.
get.
They put
Yeah,
nor do they
exactly.
care if they put it against a film that will dominate it, like Mission Impossible. They don't see, well, actually, guys, you put it in, and they'll just say, no, we don't care. It just didn't work. So, but
Yeah,
hopefully it'll come back. I get the sense
yeah,
that had they wanted to do a series, I assume Robert Ward and Devon Cullen wouldn't have done a 26 episode series anyway. So where they would have done more TV movies, perhaps had they wanted to. I'm sure they would have been up for that, but it'd be interesting to see. I know when I spoke to Ray Austin, he was very that when he went into it, it was this one-off deal. He didn't have any expectations that it would go on to. He would have done it had they wanted him back for another one, but it did seem to be just this sort of one-off
Yeah.
sort of thing,
Well,
really. But
yeah, it was always, it was always considered a backdoor pilot. You know, I mean,
hmm,
they talk. I mean, Michael talked about it as being, we'll see how well it goes, and if it goes well, we'll talk about more. Because Robert and David agreed to do more
hmm,
um, at the time, um, but it's the network. I mean, I've been on enough network shows where they're they're good shows, but the network for whatever reason has decided they just don't want to be in that particular business, whether it's superheroes or science fiction or
hmm,
whatever, and they just decide that the internal politics or the internal decisions just say, no, that's not the direction we want to go. And that's just it. It doesn't matter whether the show is being a success. It literally doesn't matter whether the show is getting ratings or it's a success creatively. It's just the guys at the top have said, no, we're not going that direction. It's not what I want. It's not what we want to do. And that's the decision that's made, and that's the end. That's that's
hmm,
the end of it. There's no more discussion of, well, maybe if we change this or change that. It's just, it's just done.
hmm,
Um, uh, so those things, those things happen. And I know, like any, and I'm a realist. I'm a realist about the fact that trying to recapture the magic that was the first and second seasons of Uncle with a whole new crew, bringing their own ideas to stuff and wanting to make it still their own, even though they're inspired by, the old show and stuff. It's never quite this. It's never quite the same. It's,
hmm.
but, so, capturing that again, um, probably impossible, but at the same time, you kind of don't want, that particular universe, that Uncle universe, to literally just evaporate and disappear,
Yeah.
and
Hmm,
not get used, something
hmm,
somewhere, something. So, getting back to Return of Uncle, like I said, it was a dream come true for me. And which is why I guess it's just burned into my memory. I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have any insights, to the casting that was going on, or why things were chosen, why a location was chosen, or any of that stuff. But the stuff that I remember being on set. And one of the things that happened that I found that there were things that happened during the days that were very unique experiences when we were shooting in the bank for the Raleigh scenes. Chuck Painter, who was the original publicist on Uncle, dropped by for a day to just see how the show was going. How he just wanted to like have a moment, just a moment's memory of seeing Uncle again. So Chuck Painter, the guy who was the publicity genius behind Uncle, who figured out how to save the show and get Vaughn and McCallum out there and doing personal appearances, and figured out the whole publicity thing to get it in front of the college kids and stuff. He dropped by for a day, so that was great to meet Chuck Painter. And And as we were sitting there talking, he was looking around and his comment was, hmm, it's really good to be here, but it's just not the same.
Mm. Yeah, 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 'cause it's sort of it's trying to be captured like lighting in the bottle, isn't it? And sort
Yeah.
of sometimes I think this film was very good, but where they made me more, it would have just been a bit too much. So maybe it was best sometimes to quit with your head possibly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a lovely film. It's I've seen it hundreds of times, no doubt, and it's
Yeah.
been
I
lovely
haven't
to
seen
talk
it.
to you. Is it so you haven't seen it for?
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a lot. I haven't sat down and watched it in a long time. So it was
Oh,
kind of,
right.
so for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
it was fun watching it without the sound on,
Mm,
just looking at the visuals, being reminded of all the stuff we went through. Something, again, all the stuff passing by so quickly. I went to, since I talked to you about having the artwork from the background of the original series. Literally, I gave it to the title house to use as the
mm,
background for the opening credits. I also went to the MGM sound department and had them find the original magnetic tape of the Uncle Communicator beeps.
mm,
And they gave it to me. They said, we don't need it anymore. Here, you can just have the original tape. So I've got that sitting around here in a storage box, the original Uncle Communicator beep tape.
mm,
Um, and they said, you don't need to bring it back. Just take it. But yeah, I went through the sound department. They went through all these drawers and they opened up these drawers and there was these round, reels of sound tape. And they were like, oh, what is the Uncle Communicator? Uncle Communicator. And they still knew where it was. It was like, hey, yeah, this is the Uncle Communicator over here.
mm,
And so we also used the original soundtrack tape magnetic recording of the Uncle Communicator beep for the show. So that's how accurate we tried to get it. I
mm,
also, while I was there, tried to find the Uncle special sound of the pistols going off, which was it's kind of a backwards half cut sound effect that the pistols on the original show made. It's very specific, and we couldn't find that. That's something that I looked for in the sound department, and we couldn't come up with it, which is why the pistols just have a regular,
mm,
um, a regular pistol sound on the
mm,
on return. But I tried to get the original sound, the original sound of the Uncle specials for the pistols, and
mm,
I I failed at finding it, and I felt I regarding the artwork, I felt really bad about the artwork because I had to return the artwork because I had the original insignia, which we weren't going to use, but I had the back, and we used the background. But I had to turn all that stuff back to the art department, and then the art department eventually closed, and they threw all that stuff out. But
ugh,
fortunately, when they went to throw that stuff out, they contacted Danny Biederman, who's the Uncle Collector, spy prop collector. Just happened the guys who were going to be throwing it out just happened to know Danny, and sent the stuff his way. So in the end result, all that artwork
good.
saved because it went to Danny Biederman.
Well,
But
at least it's
I had it in
still,
my, yeah,
yeah. Well, it's preserved and it's there for
yeah,
people, so that's
yeah,
obviously the main thing.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the attention to detail that you put into to this film. I think you can't overstate the importance of it. You know, your role in this film in terms of how good it is, I think it's quite important, and so it's been really fascinating sort of going through it with you this evening. It's been great fun.
Well, I'm glad I'm, hey, I'm glad to, get the chance to share share the info and get, have a little refresher course and kind of revisit all that stuff. And um, I'm sure there's stuff that I'm sure that there's stuff that I've missed along the way trying to catch everything. And what was weird is that getting to the end, I was like, God, that felt like we were only watching this thing for maybe 15 minutes. And I know it's like a
It makes
2 hour
it on, doesn't it?
movie. I'm like, wow,
Mm.
you know. But yeah, there were things in the script that never appeared that were really cool. Like I said, the um the mystery of why everybody's dressed in Arctic clothing at the beginning when they're out in the desert. It's like, why are they
Yeah.
dressed that way? And that's because it was
I
supposed
think
to be a
as an audience member, you never question it, but of course, the next time I watch it, I'll be like, it'll jump out at me. So
yeah, yeah,
it's very interesting that the sort of bits that you were going through, I particularly enjoyed because it was sort of things that you wouldn't have, nobody else would kind of if it think to or remember to tell us. So yeah, I'm amazed how much you remember from it as well, and it was you know, just watching you sort of clip through the thing, and I thought you don't really need me here, do you? You know, you sort of really I thought it was fantastic. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I enjoyed it, and I'm
Um,
I'm glad I had a chance to put down my
so
thoughts,
again,
and I'm glad you had a chance you have a chance to preserve it.
yeah, that's why I do what I do. You know, sort of making sure those stories don't get lost as much as possible. And of course, I know we've got more, at least another project to do in the future, and I look forward to that with great anticipation.
Okay. Well, I look forward to whatever the future holds as well. And I think this was a good time. I enjoyed revisiting good old Return.
Mm.
Fond
Yeah,
fond memories, as they say.
yes, it's a great film, and yeah, it's been really good to analyze it in this way. So well, take care, Robert. Thank you very much for doing this, and
Mm,
hopefully soon.
okay. As they say, it was my pleasure. And to everybody who's been watching, thanks for showing up, and thanks to the Uncle fandom for keeping it all alive. See you
Well,
guys.
yeah. Have a good week, Robert. Catch you later.
Okay,
Okay, take care. Bye.
you too. Thanks, Phil.